Well, hi everybody, David Cross, and I've got a couple new things this morning I want to cover. One of those being a couple new APIs in IPControl that are surrounded around the domain names, the ability to now import, export, and to get the DNS domain name that you can now use in part of your exporting or part of your applications. So really just to quickly show you that functionality, and then what I will do is kind of go through some PowerShell and then show you how some of that can be used perhaps to go in and get domains and then do comparisons and stuff. And another real quick PowerShell app I built this morning. So to begin with, this is required in IPControl 11, or requires IPControl 11. And we've introduced in there an export domain, which includes the init export, and then also a get domain by name. So to begin with the exports, very similar to the gets and the blocks and the devices, you can tell it to initialize, export, and end the initialization and export in one command, which I'm going to do through the filter by specifying a page size. So in this init, you can go out and specify various selectors, and those can be whether the name exists or whether it's equals, it contains, begins, and all of the different comparators that are also available. And you can see what those specifically are within the new API CLI documentation. Other things like reverse, forward zones, things like that. Now, what I'm going to do here is just kind of show you an example of querying any kind of domain that has .com in the domain and tell it to limit to 100 page size. And what I should get then is an array of JSON objects that represent the DNS domain that I can now start to extract information from, like the serial number or whether the TTL or the contact information, or even whether the zone is a new local RPZ, which is a new flag for the domains. And then of course you'll get a response code 200 on that. So I felt, well, that was pretty cool. I've been waiting for that for a while. And with the domain, you can also do the get domain by name. And for here, we could do the same thing. So we can specify a type and then tell it to run. Okay. What we'll get is the exact same structure, just in a single domain structure versus an array. Okay. So that's pretty much it, in terms of what we really need to look at there. And so there are some capabilities, I guess, in PowerShell. Let me show you how this works, because I kind of built a domain around this so that I could go in and actually do this work. And I haven't really shown all of this information before, so I'm going to kind of back up and kind of go over this command real quick. It's really very simple to work with, and outside of the PowerShell and understanding the parameters, having things like the command line specifying what the domain types and what the different selectors are for you, having that kind of documentation in the command line. And a couple other things here that you'll note, I have for the trusted security, I'm actually overriding that basically, or skipping the security check for the certificate. I have a self-signed, I don't have any kind of validation on that, so I just go ahead and do that. And then I have the protocols for the headers and things. But really, when it gets down to it, your entire application and API method starts with your headers, setting that authorization bearer and the access token, which in each of my individual API scripts, I get that token at the current time it's being run. And then I'm just kind of constructing dynamically the selectors based on the fields that are provided and whether or not they have to have selector strings around them or whether they're filtered, just regular values. Set that up into then a object, which this is kind of a little skewed, which then turns this into an object that's going to be passed into the body. So we're going to send this as a JSON string to this URL, which are our endpoint, and I'm going to write the URL out. I don't need to. But then I can pass this back in the domains and filter this out by object and pull the details from there. Okay, so then you can put this in a try catch. You can catch the false string if anything is not working there. So that's what I have effectively in this particular function. And so when you look at that on the command line, specifying your IPControl executive, your user, and then the selector, which you can then pass through the fields in my domains. And here you go. And this is kind of the result. And the thing that I thought was very nice about PowerShell is I could just build an array, and I can then reference that array, output it, or say, give me all of the contacts, if I want to see all of that, or names, and so on. So you can actually build this to construct and give you lists. And that's kind of what I've done with my PowerShell module, right, um, to do that. So there's a few things there, which I thought was very cool. Second of all, because now we have this ability to go in and query the IPControl DNS values and pull out the serial numbers, I had found this Resolve-DnsName command that was part of the standard PowerShell core. And I've used this kind of extensively now for pinging and getting SOAs and stuff. And the way that this works then is you can then specify like your domain. This is my lab domain. And I can go in and they say the type, which here I'm going to specify an SOA. And I can even go in and specify a server. I have a couple here that I might ping. And here you go, and I'm going to get response from one. And if I go to my other, oh, well, here's another response, but if you'll notice the serial number is different. So if I were looking at this in a tool, and I wanted to go out and immediately compare this or through some type of process, I can now very simply go out and just query the SOA on these servers and do that. So how do you do it in bulk? Well, that's then where putting these two together come kind of hand in hand. And that's what I built on this PowerShell script. And so what I've got here, and I can go over this if those are interested, but I hooked into IPControl, and again requires IPControl 11. So I have an instance that I use here in my lab and for DHCP and stuff. Once you're logged in, it just validates, basically your users here. As it calls each of the commands in PowerShell, it still authenticates you. So it's really just to test your user. And if it is tested, I can then enable or disable certain buttons and things. So just really UI control for that matter. But what we've also got here, and I'm going to have to determine how to do this. I think I'll go out and maybe query the DNS, but it's already set up that I can just add DNS servers to it. And what I effectively have is really the same list. And I'm going to reorder those lists with different servers. Now, once I've logged in, these buttons become familiar. Now I'm using that export domain command I just ran, basically with everything, and I'm populating a list. And here are all the domains I pulled, both IPv6 and others, that I can use. And I can either select one, or I'm going to tell it to run it against all of these. And because I have an IPControl instance, I can also tell it to check the IPControl or IPControl SOA of the domain against that domain in the domain checks. So what I'm doing then is I'm going out and comparing each of those servers, running that Resolve-DnsName against it, pulling back the serial number, and if I have one, I flag it. If I don't, I mark it as yellow, meaning I don't have really any data. So I can filter on these. And then if they match, I want to go ahead and mark these as green. So I have some type of visual indicators. Now, where we have those SOAs that are mismatched, I'm doing it first on just the DNS serial numbers on the servers defined. Although these are also mismatched, I could go in and do some additional comparison, but I opted not to do that, at this point. So I thought, that's really great. And this is, again, just a few hours, but this is something that I've been working in Visual Basic. I've been working my admin toolbox for, a long time. And one of the minimal things I wanted was the ability to quickly compare SOA. And by simply finding that resolve name and DNS name and then the API with the domains, I can now do this both without IPControl, meaning I can just go in and specify the servers arbitrarily, add my own list, save it, and then build my own list of domains, either through file or however I want to do this. And I'm going to extend that. But if I have IPControl, and will have a settings here, and I think what I'll do with this app is that if I do have IPControl and it can validate that it's there, maybe it'll enable the login features in a tab for this. So a few other things coming down the road, but that was my, I said I'd have a little bit of time, and just this morning what I put together for the developers out there in PowerShell or IPControl or IP administrators, DNS, there's some really cool things we can do here, and let me know if you're interested, because I am interested in, again, like I said, building on this PowerShell. And once I get all of these out and I start wrapping up my PowerShell module, and I'm again go back and confirm it on Linux, the Linux version won't have this UI. This is Windows specific, the Windows version build, but I'll bundle all this together, I think, and put all the sample apps in here of what I have that can be used with some restrictions, because we don't want to go on deleting everything in your database. And of course, it'll take some permission. So, all right. So have a great day. So great Independence Day. And we celebrate today because of that independence, that we can do things like this. So thumbs up, everybody. Have a great day. Be safe. And I will talk to you soon. Take care.